Hey everyone, Mark Kakish, Taylor Finger, here with the hide at the Wisconsin Waterfowl Hunters Expo in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Happy to see everybody here today. Many thanks to Taylor Finger and Grit for really being the brains and muscle behind the podcast. Without, Chase and Grit,
it would just be
you don't look as good as you do. Right,
yeah,
it'd be ugly. Yeah, it'd be terrible.
Wildlife Federation's The Hide.
So, you know what? This is year 3 of the Expo, and, this is a great way for everyone to come together and see waterfowl in different aspects, right?
It feels like an expo. Like our first couple years, there was just, we had some vendors, and last year you started to get that feeling, and now, there's thousands of people out there walking around in different barns throughout the entire expo, the youth zone. It looks like it's going to be a good day.
Yeah, state duck, pheasant, and turkey stamp contest was judged this morning. State duck and goose calling contest this afternoon.
Decoy carving contest.
Yeah.
Seminars from way smarter people than you and I.
Yeah.
So.
Barney Caleb, 3-time world duck calling champion, selling calls here. Yeah. Where else can you go? Ducks, boats, right? Calls, you name it.
The season right around the corner.
Yeah, and most importantly, Taylor Finger's going to tell us all about 2023 waterfowl season.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, we'll start with the flyway stuff. So I drove 12 hours yesterday coming back from Arkansas, and when I left yesterday, the whole week, it was 115 degrees in Arkansas. I know we were warm, but now the fact that we're sitting at 70 degrees makes it feel all that much better to live in Wisconsin and not Arkansas.
It's always cooler someplace else, so you're not getting any sympathy from anybody in this room.
But anyway, we had the flyway meetings. For folks that don't know, we have 4 flyways in the country. We have the Pacific, the Central, the Mississippi, and the Atlantic. And so we went to the Mississippi flyway meetings. It's 14 states and 3 Canadian provinces. And what we do is we review all of the biological data, all of the survey data, everything that'll then go to help inform the Fish and Wildlife Service ultimately make a decision on what the hunting seasons will be. So we just got the data from the Fish and Wildlife Service this last Friday on all of the population estimates that were flown for this year, and so that information will go to determine what the 2024 season will be. If folks can remember, in the past we used to use that data for current year, but the Fish and Wildlife Service said that that's not enough time for them anymore to make that decision. So yeah, it was been just unbelievably wild, just going through and looking through, trying to go through 20 different reports to make a decision ultimately on recommendations that will go to the Fish and Wildlife Service to help determine what next year's season is going to be.
Well, on everybody's mind right now is in Wisconsin, we started off fairly wet, everything was looking good, and then June hit and
it's hardly rained since.
Right.
Yeah. No, fortunately, so again, when we did our breeding conditions, our surveys were actually in pretty solid shape. That's when we count them. So that's always one thing to think about, is that what we count in the springtime doesn't necessarily equate to what we see in the fall, because we're not counting the broods. We're not counting the young ones of the year. We're just counting the ones that come back. So that's, even if you say, hey, we didn't see as many birds as we wanted to see, if you had a good nesting and brood rearing season, then you're going to have better numbers in the fall. And I think that's kind of, I was a little pessimistic because we hadn't had any rain. You think brood conditions, habitat conditions, but we figure out through our banding operation how things are looking. We exceeded our wood duck quota, I think, for the first time in 10 years, and a couple of our operations didn't even get to band yet. Some of them had 120 birds on bait and they haven't even shot yet. So we could have easily banded nearly twice as many wood ducks as we did this year. And mallards, I think we're going to get right at our quota. So again, you get pessimistic because you just don't know if we have enough water to draw the birds or if they're going to be somewhere else. And again, when we look at the breakdown of adults versus juveniles, it's been a pretty solid year.
And the other thing is, with a lot of smaller wetlands right now dried up, where you do have water, there's a significant amount of ducks. Some of the places that we were scouting for early geese, we're seeing anywhere from 300 mallards to over 1,000 mallards that last half hour before dark.
Talking to a lot of our biologists across the state, our marshes have never looked as good as they have in their careers as they are right now because they dried out. And we have duck food absolutely everywhere. We just need a little bit of rain to put on top of that duck food, and it's going to be, I think, a stellar fall. So,
yeah. So, getting back to down in Arkansas, what were like the top three, topics of conversation?
Big one was pintail. So, if folks recall from last year, we were less than
on the edge,
100,000 birds away from having a closed season continentally on pintail. And that one bounced back up. We bounced up, before it's like 1.75 million, I think we're at 2.2. So we're well above that 2 million mark now. So again, we're at liberal 1, so a 60-day season with 1 bird a day for pintail. The other one is mallards, and that's a interesting one. We have gone through a process, if folks remember, for the way we set our adaptive harvest management. We were looking at Canadian ponds, we were looking at mallards, and then that's what determines if we have a 60, a 45, or a 30-day season. Well, we've adjusted that harvest strategy because we had set this limit that said, hey, if mallards ever get below this limit, we're going to reduce our season, with no science behind it. It was just an arbitrary number. So we removed that number and inserted science. But if we wouldn't have done that, next year we would be sitting in a 30-day season with our mallard numbers, because they're the lowest they've been since 1993. And we're well within a 60-day framework. We'd have to have another 2 million mallards fall off the table and have no more water in the prairies where abnormally dry this year. So again, we're still sitting pretty good at a 60-day season, but this is the lowest mallard number we've had since 1993 through our counts, and that's just something to watch. We're going to have to keep an eye on it.
And for me, not the biologist, the guy reading the newspaper or making a telephone call, I think this is where the law of average really comes into a play, right?
Yeah.
Because the years that, you have record-breaking mallard counts, but realistically, ice didn't leave, the mallards stayed here and were counted here in Wisconsin, where this year, birds could pass through, water conditions, everything plays a role into that season count, and that's why we take that average.
Yeah, it's, again, you look at this year, dry on the prairies. Just dry all across Canada, if you want to talk about that. But fortunately, the U.S. prairies, North Dakota and South Dakota, were really good conditions this year, so that helped bump those numbers up in terms of our wetland conditions. And that's why we don't just look at one spot and say, hey, this is going to be the only spot that we look at to determine what the season frameworks are going to be. So, yeah, it's, like I said, it's something to look at for here in Wisconsin mallards. We were right at our long-term average. We've been pretty steady Eddie for the last 15 years or so on mallards. So we tend to be considerably more stable because we have different types of habitat, whereas out in the prairies, if it's wet, marginal habitat is good habitat. If it's dry, marginal habitat's terrible, and even good habitat's mediocre. So when you have wet, it makes up. It's like a Band-Aid for all of that, all of the stuff we've had for drain tiling, farming, tilling, all that stuff. So if you have water, you can still produce ducks out there, but if there's no water, it's real tough.
So, when it comes to continentally, we're looking average.
Yeah.
And when we come into Wisconsin, we're probably average plus maybe
yeah,
a little
our
bit.
blue-winged teal numbers are, we're, I want to say, almost 20% above our long-term average for blue-winged teal, which doesn't surprise me because if it's dry on the prairies, we always have water. No matter what, even if we're dry, we're still have water. We got 5 million acres of wetlands and 15,000 lakes. We got water, so we see teal tend to shift towards us. Mallards, we've been steady. Wood ducks, we were ridiculously high the last 2 years. This year it came back down to what our normal wood duck numbers. So again, things look good, and Canada geese are everywhere. So
yeah.
Yeah.
And for blue-winged teal, we're coming into teal hunting season roughly a week away, and a week and a half to a week ago, we started to see teal coming into the southern part of the state. Now, whether or not they're local birds or pass through, right? We don't, who knows, right?
Yeah, I think what is the low tonight? It's almost 50 degrees, and that's just here. If we get north of us, we get any type of cold weather, we're going to see teal coming in droves.
Yeah, and this year, on Father's Day, I was up in Horicon in the marsh, and we ran into teal, and they're not leaving, right?
No, yeah,
they're not leaving. They're
so
staying.
The interesting thing, they move though. We put a band on a teal in around the Horicon area in June a couple of years ago, and it was shot the first week of September in Argentina. So again, just going to put in perspective is that those birds, they're moving, and that was always one of the big pushes behind the teal season is that we're not going to kill all of our own birds. A lot of the birds that hit here in the first part of September are coming from all over the country. And so, yeah, we felt pretty confident. And like I said, we get any type of cool weather with the food that we have, get a little rain, it's going to be stellar.
All right, so what else did they have? What's number 2 on the list?
Oh man, number 2. So a big one right now is the Fish and Wildlife Service budget stuff, just looking at monitoring. So that one's, again, it's not a big sexy thing to talk about, but it could really have impacts on us moving forward in that, I think right now we're zeroed out for a budget, which we don't think that that's going to happen, but if that were to happen, we'd have no money for surveys, no money for banding, no money for anything to help us make these determinations. And do we think that's actually going to happen? No, but we're starting to look at different things to look at, like will we only be able to fly the duck survey once every 2 years because the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't have enough money, or things along those lines. And so we are providing feedback from the flyway, from states. I think there's a big push from a lot of our conservation organizations to look at that and say, hey, can DU and Delta leverage their political power or clout to try to make sure that the Fish and Wildlife Service have enough money to get us the information to ultimately make a decision on hunting.
And here's a great time to plug by 2 duck stamps, right? 98 cents out of every duck stamp comes back to conservation, right?
Right now, this is the time. They're out there. It's a pretty awesome stamp. And again, if anybody's interested, next month they're going to be having the federal duck stamp competition in Iowa. So I think it's at Drake University. So if you've never had an opportunity to do it, it is definitely a unique thing to see. These are the best artists in the world, and if I had to put my money down, I'm guessing Hauptman's going to win it. You know what I mean?
Way to go out on a limb.
Yeah, right, exactly. 3 brothers, unbelievable.
So all right, so significantly, we've always heard in the past that survey is key to setting our season. So this is an opportunity to get out. One, politically, to talk to your state legislator, your federal legislators, senators, create that conversation, on both fronts, so we try to put pressure.
Yeah, I mean, it's in the law that we have to have this survey in order to determine what the hunting seasons are. So ultimately, if they're going to try to pull that, like what has to happen, So there's, like I said, that one was a big point of discussion for us moving forward. Other than that, it was a lot of really awesome research that's happening across the country. I think right now we got more backpack transmitters on mallards in the United States than we've had at any point in time in the last 20 years. We got 3 different operations, Arkansas, Tennessee, and then one out of Michigan, just because mallards are that duck. And if we're seeing differences in populations, we got to know where are these birds going, what are the habitat looks like, everything that we can about them.
So stable isotope study.
Yep.
I mean, we're still doing that here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, so for folks that don't know, again, stable isotopes, the whole idea behind this is we used to use bands to tell people where the birds came from that they shot. So again, the idea of, you put it on there, you shoot it, that bird came from Wisconsin because it was banned in Wisconsin. Well, we have a different technique when we had to look at a different technique because, for example, Canada doesn't ban mallards. So inherently, you're only going to find the bands that you put out, which were Wisconsin. So what we were able to do is that we're able to pull a feather from a bird and look at the hydrogen isotope within that feather, where that bird drank the water, the hydrogen from the water, where that bird pulled that and grew that feather. So we can actually look at a latitudinally, hey, that bird was shot in Wisconsin. The hydrogen isotope said that bird came from Saskatchewan, or that bird came from Minnesota. And so we're doing that for mallards, we're doing that for ringnecks. We have pulled feathers for teal and wood ducks. We're not doing those right now, but if we have the feathers, we can do it whenever we want. Right. And then building a whole new library for Canada geese, the same thing. So that one's one of the big research projects we're still working on right now here in Wisconsin.
Okay.
Yep. But yeah, no, like I said, it's awesome when you can get that many people, for the flyway, all of these groups, organizations, state, federal entities to talk about everything from high path avian influenza to talking about research to talking about, what are the differences in Louisiana, like model ducks. It's not something that I've ever had to care about, but it's a huge deal down in that neck of the woods. And so just get an idea of, what's happening across the country, and so that we can share that with our constituents, we can share that with the folks out there.
So where do we stand right now at AI? I mean, it's been in the news a little bit, but knock on wood, we're holding our own, right?
Yeah, it's been actually really, we were worried that this year was going to be as bad, if not worse than last year, and it's essentially been a non-event.
And you always hear when you come in hot, dry summer and you get these hard, heavy, quick rains, it promotes AI, it promotes
concentrates
botulism,
the bird,
right?
yeah. So again, if we haven't seen it by now, we're feeling a lot better that we're sitting in a good place, because we had a ton of research on it. That the interesting thing is that these birds are all developing antibodies to this thing. So essentially, it's not that they haven't been exposed to it. It's like they've all been exposed to it. You can't seem to kill a mallard with high-path avian influenza. Canada geese, mallards, and wood ducks all have this. That you could see the shift. We were showing it like when it first came here. Ooh, man, birds were dying. Now you see it, and they all have antibodies. So it's just one of those things that took a couple of years. But we don't know what that effect is on poultry industry, So that's the thing, because when they get it, they kill all the poultry, so you don't really develop an antibody. So now you can really see that they've locked down at these poultry operations that biosecurity is a huge deal. If we have any places for these birds to get in, we're not letting them in, because last year was a bad year for it.
Well, I had, with my day job, I had to go to a dog food company. And to get in the front door was the easy part. But to get back into the plant where we had to go, not such an easy task, right? I mean, biosecurity and everything that's involved with the potential passing of any type of disease or bacteria, wow.
I mean, again, for some of my other stuff is we release, 75,000 pheasants from the state DNR. So, I mean, can you imagine if we had to depopulate all of the pheasants that we have in our game farm operation? And fortunately, biosecurity, those people have, number one thing is they're locked in. You don't have a yard flock if you're working for the game farm. You don't go home to chickens and come back. It's just not a thing.
Right. So it's always going to be a topic until certain things change. But sand hills, they were another bumper crop of sand hills.
Yeah, record number of sandhill cranes for our fall Eastern population sandhill crane survey. So again, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Alabama, all, they did their quota and permit process for next year's sandhill crane seasons. Those are the 3 states that have them here in our flyway.
Yep. Mourning doves.
Mourning doves. So again, this was an interesting one, and we're looking at the science behind it, because about 10 years ago we shifted from spring call count surveys to banding, and using banding to estimate their population. And since we've done so, our estimates of population have gone down significantly. Like, we went from 100 million mourning doves in 2000 down to about 40 million doves in 2022. And some of that we're looking into, because the science behind it, you put a band on a bird, we want to put them on birds that are going to get shot so we can collect the data. But does that represent the actual population of mourning doves? And we're finding no. So that way then you overestimate harvest and drive the population down. So we're working on different models and information to update that. But again, mourning doves, they did tick up. I think this last count was 5 or 6 million more than what it was last year. So again, doves are sitting in a good spot too.
And I got to do my buddy Mike Vassar. He's like, "Where are we with woodcock?" And I was like, "Woodcock? What is that, a bird?" And he, I got it. Hi, Mike. But the point is Wisconsin ranks in what, top 2 or 3 states?
Yeah, we bounce around with Michigan and Minnesota. In some years we're number 1, some years we're number 2 in terms of number of hunters and number of woodcock killed. And we have been, I would say, we're slight decline over the long period of time, but it's not surprising because it's all habitat driven. I mean, we need young forests. We need to be cutting trees, and at this point in time, our foresters will tell us that Wisconsin is as forested now as when it was when people came here in wagons. So just to put into perspective is we need that habitat. But all in all, there's some really awesome research that's going on with woodcock right now. We're putting backpack transmitters on birds in the Mississippi Flyway and the Atlantic Flyway, because right now we manage those 2 populations separately. But what we're finding out is Wisconsin woodcock shows up in Florida, or Maine woodcock shows up in Alabama, And are they really a different population?
Right.
And so that's one of the researches that we're looking at, is to say, hey, why are we making this complicated if we can all manage it together?
So bluebills and sea ducks, right? So they always make the news, right? Bluebills, right? So where are we at with bluebills?
Oh man, I was hoping to God bluebills would bounce up about 500,000 birds. We're at about 3.5 million scaup, and when we get to 4 million, we can have 3 scaup a day. And when we get under that, we have 2 scaup a day for 45 days and 1 scaup a day for 15. And it's a nightmare from us for a flyway, and we've been trying to work with the Fish and Wildlife Service because all of the science and research shows that hunters are not driving scaup populations. So to have a bag limit of 2 scaup for 45 days and we're not making any difference. It's just complex regulations at that point in time. But this is the framework that we have to work within until the Fish and Wildlife Service find enough time or money to update their harvest strategy. And we're talking different ways from the flyway, like potentially we could contract that work out because the feds don't seem to have the time or money to do it. So could we hire a university professor or hire some other, super smart individual, Ben Sedinger, from Point or somebody to say, hey, we can do this, and then get a sign off from the flyway. So that's something on there. Sea ducks, generally across the board, our Eastern harvest survey, our Eastern spring survey is where we get a lot of like our bufflehead and our goldeneye and things along those lines. And both bufflehead and goldeneye were up this year compared to previous years. So for folks that's sitting on Green Bay or sitting on the Great Lakes,
there's no shortage.
No, there should be plenty of birds out there. And long-tailed ducks, that's still one that we keep hearing about every year. It keeps coming up, and that we probably get more comments about longtails than any other sea duck because there's, people are feeling guilty about it. Like that, hey, we're out there and you see guides shooting 6 longtails a day, and they're easy to decoy, they're easy to hunt. And like you said, hunters are like, is this sustainable? And so that's something, that we have on our docket to look moving forward. It's tough because they nest in an area of the world that just human beings don't go to.
Well, and the good news in regards to harvest and in regards to longtails is as many as we see get harvested, realistically,
fraction.
The people who get out there and harvest them are very
avid few. Yeah.
Right.
And so again,
numbers.
Our best estimate for longtails continentally is roughly 1 million. And Wisconsin shoots on average between 7,000 to 10,000 a year. So again, the idea of that we're not driving that population down. It's just a communication thing. Are our longtails different than things on the East Coast? Are we negatively affecting our resource or not? And so those are things that we'll have to be looking into.
Yeah, and I think science is driven right now by money and funding, right?
Yep.
So if we have funding, we can
time, money, funding, staff, all of that. So.
What else? What else came out of the trip to Arkansas?
Yeah, right now, like I said, the big one is just trying to figure out where we sit within our states. So big banding, our banding efforts are we banding enough wood ducks to answer or provide us the most amount of opportunity in terms of, every year we keep hearing people pushing for 4 wood ducks or bigger wood ducks in the bag because it's just, right now in Wisconsin, we're keep edging up in terms of wood ducks are getting close to the number 1 bird in the bag. And so can you add additional harvest opportunity? And looking at research of, is our bird a Wisconsin bird or not? Because we're finding males, they'll fly down, a Wisconsin male will fly down and then find a female from anywhere else and then go with her. So is it our bird? Is it not our bird? Are the birds we're banding, were they produced here? Were they not produced there? So again, another research thing that we're really trying to track on.
Yeah, and wood ducks, a couple years ago I shot a wood duck opening weekend that was banded that year, Young of the Year, in Missouri.
Yeah. So those are ones that we just, we put, and that's our biggest issue with banding is our assumption is that there are birds, but we put band on a mallard last year in Meade, and within 2 days it was in South Dakota, and it would have got caught in South Dakota and banded as a South Dakota mallard. So again, just he had a bad day and he said, I'm getting the heck out of Wisconsin. But it's one of those ones that it gets tough when we have to make these assumptions.
So bringing things into Wisconsin. Yes. So we have some changes coming up, right?
Yeah, I mean, across most of it, everything's going to look pretty close to what we had last year. One of the big ones is our Mississippi River Canada Goose Zone. So, I mean, the Mississippi River for decades has had a Canada Goose season that started the same time as their duck season. And again, their argument was that we don't want to disturb the river before our duck season starts to move these birds out of the area. And we've seen with the progression of Canada goose populations, with how much use the river gets, the disturbances occurring there. And again, based on the feedback that we collected from across the state, that there is interest in opening up harvest opportunity on those Canada geese earlier. So we're starting the Mississippi River Canada Goose season on September 16th with the rest of the state.
Yeah, and I think that's going to provide some opportunity and consistency, right?
Yeah, yep. Again, it's one of those ones is we got a lot of questions is how come we're not able to hunt when everywhere else is. So,
on top of that, we're going to roll into the next 3 years.
Yeah. Yep. So we're going to be looking at setting our hunting seasons for the next 3 years, and then after that, cycling it for five-year time periods, so to match up with our zone discussion. And again, the whole idea behind that is that we set the seasons, and we don't have the same exact argument with the same exact people every single year to come out the same exact season structure. So what this does is it allows us to say, hey, these are what we think, these are what the seasons are going to be, plus or minus if canvasback go to 2-to-1 or pintail go 2-to-1, because we can make those adjustments because we want to provide as much opportunity from the federal perspective. But season dates, this is what's going to stick. And try it. Experience it for a couple years, and if you like it, awesome. If you don't, then you have an opportunity to say, hey, we've tried this, we don't like it, let's do something different. And then what that does is it opens up our time, DNR time, your time as a federation, that we can focus on waterfowl management, focus on implementing the waterfowl management plan. And it's not spending hundreds of hours every single year having the same arguments with the same exact people and setting the same.
And this should allow us an opportunity to engage better with the public, the user group, and some of the stakeholder groups, and potentially provide more research by the private sector to help out the state, because as we know, funding for projects like this are, short and far and few between. So
it just opens up our time to be waterfowl managers rather than people managers. And so that's what we got into being, in this profession. So
And I think data coming from the citizens that use the resource, I think is key, so that they can feel a little bit more of a greater attachment to their 30, 45, or 60-day duck season, because realistically, you and I, we worry about duck season roughly 365 days a year, right? And it's not even about shooting ducks.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, it's one of those things that I sit there and you talk, and all of our surveys show that the average duck hunter in the state of Wisconsin hunts 11 days a year and shoots 10 ducks. And so we argue about 60 days, 45 days, 30 days, what's this bag limit, what's that bag limit, and in most cases, for most amount of people, it's not all that big of a deal. But like you said, this is what we eat, breathe, and sleep. So,
Wisconsin's unique. It's one of the few states in the country that has the full gamut come September 1st, right? September 1st to the end of the year, there's, waterfowl hunting, other bird hunting, all the fishing that we have in this state. I mean, the resource that we provide opportunity for is great.
Oh man, when you're looking at Labor Day weekend this year, I mean, if you can't find something to do, you're not looking hard. So it's going to be, I'm hoping, weather like today.
Right.
Weather like today, if we be out there, nobody likes to be out when it's 90 degrees, but you and I are going to be out there.
We're going to be out there.
Yeah.
Right. So, finishing up, I think as the podcast rolls through the rest of the year, we're going to get, some AI folks in here. We're going to, I guess, research-wise have a couple, but hopefully we're going to be able to get out and interview some hunters at different public hunting grounds, and get out there and maybe do some hunting ourselves, right?
Yeah, no, I definitely want to get out and, again, make this something that everyone owns, because you and I, we talk to people, and it's a different flavor than what you would see at a boat launch, in terms of, hey, you probably a little bit more so than me, but like griping about the Horicon Dam or something along those lines, seeing some local issues. Seeing some local issues. I mean, we're going to hear about it Sheboygan this year. They tore the dam out of Sheboygan because it hasn't been replaced in almost 100 years. And Sheboygan Marsh is going to be wet or dry all duck season this year,
Yeah.
and we're going to hear about it. Same thing we heard Grand River Dam 2-3 years ago. That it's so those are the types of things that if you and I we can get out in front of folks and say, hey, here's the justification why this is happening, because I don't think a lot of people are like, oh God, the DNR is just drawing everything down. There's a whole lot more behind it than what most folks think.
You know, the key to remember is low water for the majority of the year, put water on it, great duck habitat, holds the birds here longer, especially on the public hunting grounds that have the ability to have good food. And, you know, you brought it up, Horicon, the dam has been, you know, less than perfect for, let's just say, several years.
Yeah.
Probably, you know, rumor is 2025 start construction on replacement.
Yeah.
And just like Grand River, it's going to be, you know,
That's
pretty
the
slow
biggest
going.
thing that we have to communicate to our hunters is how important drying out of marshes is. I mean, everyone loves to be able to get out on marsh with, you know, your mud motor, your surface driver, just a regular outboard, but that is not necessarily conducive to the vast majority of waterfowl use in the fall. And that, I mean, if you can get out with a kayak, you can get out with a canoe, you can definitely do some damage, but you have to do a little bit more work, and that's where it gets difficult because most hunters go back to the same spot, the same place, and if it's dry, then what do you do?
You know, I'll finish up for me today with stakeholder groups, right? So Wisconsin Wildlife Federation, Wisconsin Waterfowl Association, Ducks Unlimited Delta, everybody has a different take. However, we all come back to the center circle on wildlife, waterfowl conservation, and what benefits the resource the most is having different eyes, different ears, different opinions. And if you, the general public, can do something, these are organizations that by joining them, you provide a resource to conservation and to the, you know, habitat. And I think that is so key to your work, to Ducks Unlimited work, right? I mean, without Ducks Unlimited here in the state, as far as funding goes, Horicon Dam, Grand River, other projects, without WWA, you know, they're starting a public lands position so we can help the state
get the work done. That, like we said before, it comes down to money and it comes down to time. And again, the biggest one that I think people, you're like, well, you know, are they really doing it for hunters? Across the board for all of this, we are trying to promote as much opportunity for hunters because you ultimately are the ones paying for everything. So again, if you're not providing that opportunity, you're not buying a stamp, you're not buying a license, and then there's no money to do the work to maintain or sustain the population. So,
you know, someone very close to me said they were in a discussion with someone that said, well, I just paid my property taxes and I expect that this trail to be blah, blah, blah. Well, I got news for you. Most 99% of the time, your property taxes
not coming back to that.
It's not about conservation. It's about, you know, the roads, your schools,
administration. Yeah.
So, in most cases, the user group here, in this specific case, pays for the things. And I'll finish that with the federal refuge at Horicon is funded by 98% duck stamp dollars, right? So, not GPR money.
Right. Well, with that, again, we want to thank folks for turning in. We're here at the Waterfowl Hunter Expo 2023 here in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Again, we're hearing goose calls and duck calls and things all going off, so I think it's going to be a great day. And again, hopefully you tune in for the next one.
Go out and enjoy the show today, and if you have questions, hit us. We're going to be here for a little bit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.